Schenk, Executive Director of Environmental Stewardship at Providence, and we're glad you're all joining us today or watching later. As a reminder, the information that we're sharing today is for information purposes only. If you have any medical or health questions, please reach out to your healthcare professional. Now let's begin. Today, we're going to have a conversation about mental health issues related to climate change, including a phenomenon that has been called climate anxiety. I'm joined by Tyler Norris, Chief Executive of Wellbeing Trust, and by Sydney, both a high school and college student, a member of the National Student Advisory Council of Work to Be Well, a program of the Wellbeing Trust. What I'd like to do first is have each of us give a little orientation on to how the topic of climate anxiety relates to our work and why we're interested in it and paying attention to it. I'll start, then I'll ask Tyler and then Sydney to provide a bit of background and context. So from my perspective, at Providence, we have made the commitment to become carbon negative by 2030. This is an enormous goal as we try to decarbonize our health system, which means to decrease and eliminate the carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions throughout the organization. We anchor this work in our core value of justice because we know that pollution and our climate crisis impact people unfairly, with the most vulnerable being impacted the most. Also, other species are impacted, and that is not fair, and future generations are negatively impacted as they inherit the pollution we are creating today. This is really challenging, and we know that people can get overwhelmed. Providence has made big commitments to mission, mental health, health equity, and environmental stewardship. These are related, and we wanted to take some time today to talk about intersections between our environmental crisis and mental health specifically. Tyler, would you say a few words about yourself and the Wellbeing Trust?
Beth, thanks for inviting me, and so good to be here talking about a very difficult subject, climate anxiety, and bringing meaning to what the worry and the fear and the grief and the suffering that is being reflected here and making that really very real. I'm a person whose early life experiences called me to serve the health and well-being of community. And having served now in about 500 communities working on building the public will to measurably improve health and well-being for people and places, it's really an honor to be part of the Providence family and serving through Wellbeing Trust. Wellbeing Trust is an impact philanthropy with the mission to advance the mental, social, and spiritual health of the country. We have a goal of saving lives from death by substance misuse, alcohol, and suicide. And on the more positive side, to increase equitable well-being, spirit, mind, body, for all. We do that through transforming care so that integrated whole person care with no wrong door is accessible to all in America, helping shape policy to pay for that care and ensure that people have reasonable access to it, fair access to that. But more importantly, to look at, even if you get the care right and get it paid for, how do we create the conditions in our communities, in our country, and in our planet to support human flourishing in the first place? And that really brings us to this dialogue. We've been working very actively to cultivate a movement across the country, not only with those focused on climate, but on education, on the strength of our workforce, on the strength of our economy, and on the functioning of communities that work for all in America. And this means investing in policy change, building constituency, aligning leadership, bringing the right data forward, and building the political will in this country to act on the issues that underlay what is a very, very real and rising issue for so many in this world, which is our concerns about the climate. 2/3 of people in America are concerned about what the climate change means for our planet, and half of us on how this is impacting our mental health.
Thank you, Tyler. That was really, really well said. And congratulations on the progress you and your teams are making with Wellbeing Trust. It's so refreshing to hear about how you're going upstream to issues that cause later health outcomes, and also just the importance of emotional and mental health, which I know Providence has committed to. So congratulations. So Sydney, let me turn to you. Will you please tell us a bit about yourself and your roles? I know you're a student in both high school and college, and with the Student Advisory Council for the Work to Be Well program.
Yes, I just want to thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak on climate anxiety, which is so prevalent in my generation specifically. And as for my work with Work to Be Well, Work to Be Well is a mental health organization that is geared specifically towards teens and is teen-led. And our goal is to provide free mental health resources for teens, educators, and their parents. I work specifically, as you said, on the National Student Advisory Council, and we are there to give a teen perspective on these mental health issues. Yeah, I just wanted. I've been involved in trying to fight for climate change and work with climate anxiety for my whole life, and I just wanted to thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, hey, right back at you. We thank you for joining us. Not necessarily so easy to be on a public display like this. So we're going to have a bit of a roundtable conversation today. So we're going to take turns asking each other questions to help understand this issue of climate anxiety from all of our perspectives. We also invite you as the viewers to type in questions, and as we have time, we may be able to address a few of those. So we'll go in a circle, and I'll start, and I'm going to start by asking Tyler a question. So, Tyler, as you've indicated, you're deeply engaged in emotional wellness, and you mentioned that people have a lot of distress today, whether it's from the pandemic, most acutely and currently, from modern life in general, and partly, we believe, from reckoning with the climate crisis, as you indicated. Wellbeing Trust recently partnered with the APA, the American Psychological Association, and Eco America on the release of a new resource, Mental Health and Our Changing Climate, which we can probably drop in the chat, which chronicles the impacts of climate change on Americans' mental health well-being and provides guidance and resources to act and advocate. So tell us about that, and give us a little bit of more information about how does climate change add anxiety for people?
Well, Beth, first of all, thanks for asking that question. And our partnership with the American Psychological Association and Eco America on not only what are the issues and what's real, but what can be done comes right out of the mission of Wellbeing Trust as shaped by the Sisters of Providence and St. Joseph at our founding, whose counsel was to take prudent risks for the poor and vulnerable by watching the signs of the times. And so with a mission like that, watching the signs of the times, paying attention to these layered crises that are impacting our mental, emotional, physical, social well-being. It's impacting us in terms of our own conversations with ourselves, with those we love, with our families, with our coworkers. We've got to take stock of what is actually going on that makes climate anxiety understandable and very real and to be honored. First of all, let's take a look at not only the impact of COVID on us over these last couple of years, and I won't launch into that. Everybody's got their own lived experience, some more challenging than others. But alongside that is extraordinary political polarity. I think all of us are like, how do you possibly move forward in this country when we can hardly have conversations of significance together? So we have a biologic challenge and a political challenge. Economically, we know that so many Americans are not doing better, that despite rapid increases in the stock market and so many other indicators, that's not translating to how well we're all doing when we go to the grocery store or look at our own bank balance. And so many are finding they're losing ground. You look at African Americans with zero net worth as a net in this country. You can't actually do well and not be able to be banked or get a loan or function in the economy. We have these issues of the issues of race and the death of Black people and others at the hands of police, and the struggles that we've had around addressing how do we appropriately deal with race in this an extraordinary diverse economy, or diverse democracy? How do we actually do that well? And then we have climate on top of it. So if you add all these layered crises, it is no wonder that we're all experiencing increased rates of anxiety, depression, falling back on our addictions. This isn't a moral failing or a character flaw if you're feeling this. This is you being a sensitive human being feeling the world around you. We also know that I'm speaking as a white person, obviously here, but there's a disproportionate impact. Out of COVID, the rates of mortality and morbidity have been 4 times that for Black and Brown Americans, 10 times that for Native Americans. So if we really look at what is underneath this in terms of these social determinants of mental health, we can agree that, yeah, we got to get the care right and get it paid for, but that the experiences people are having are fundamentally traumatic, and that naturally impacts our mental emotional well-being. If you are feeling vulnerable, you are human, and you are sensitive, and you are sensing the world around you. And it's very difficult if and Sydney, I'll turn to you in a second, if we're thinking about our future, and I know this is true with my own kids who are now in their mid-20s, when they think about their future and what climate change might mean for them, their friends, and parts of the world, it's difficult to be positive. That doesn't mean you can't have hope, and I know we're going to come back to that. The only thing I want to say before maybe I turn the question to Sydney in this round robin and ask her is that those of us in the healthcare sector focused on quality improvement, safety, increasing access to affordable care, we know that from the system science that every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. So if we are experiencing increased rates of anxiety, depression, addiction, fear, suffering, that this is not just that there's something the matter with us, that in fact we are responding as sensitive beings. So the question is, what shall we do with this awakening to our condition? Not as a problem to be admired, but as something that is worthy of our lives being dedicated to. And Sydney, I so enjoyed meeting you for the first time about a week or so ago. And I'd love it if you could tell us a bit about your interest in climate change, how you got involved, and tell us a little bit about your feelings around climate and our natural world, both you and some of your friends. Maybe you can build on some of the things I heard you say so articulately the other day.
Yeah, for me, I've always been connected to the environment and nature from a very, very young age. I like to say that when I was younger, like the forests were my playground. And I know for me, I'm from Washington State, and this summer we had this gigantic heat wave and 78 people died. 2 years ago, we had our whole month of August, the skies were just orange from wildfire smoke. And that is absolutely terrifying. I cannot think past the age of 30 because I'm so scared of what the world is going to be like. And there's a lot of feeling of helplessness, I think, when you're a teenager, because you're not the one who's making money. You're not the one who's putting food on the table. You feel like you cannot do anything, and you also can't vote. And so you're seeing this world just crumbling around you, and you feel like you cannot do anything, but you're also told from an extremely young age that it is your responsibility, that your generation is going to be the one to fix it. And it's just this strange feeling of helplessness and like you're failing because you are not meeting up to that responsibility that you've been told you had since such a young age. And also just seeing the world that you love and the nature that you love start to die. That is so helpless and just demoralizing, and it hurts. It hurts so much. And I know I'm not the only one who feels this. All of my friends feel the same way. We are all terrified, but like I said, we feel like we also cannot meet a responsibility that is being shoved onto us since we were 11 or 10. It is not a good situation for teens right now. And I want to ask you, Beth. So you're helping Providence to reduce its greenhouse gas pollution. How is this action that you're taking related to mental health? I know Tyler spoke a bit about this earlier, but if you could go into specifics of what exactly you are doing.
Well, Sydney, I first have to acknowledge that you said a mouthful there. And I know we're going to talk a little more about it, but you've just really articulated well, I think, almost a distilled version of the climate anxiety that I feel, because you reflected that you're feeling this, looking at your entire future, and your future is longer than mine, and the kind of juxtaposition that you said about feeling this pressure, but really not having the agency yet to act so much because you, as you said, you're not the breadwinner for yourselves, you're not voting yet. So I know we'll come back to this, but I just want to acknowledge that because that's something that I know parents are all concerned about. The parents who may be listening today are concerned about, young people your age and older, people really all throughout, people who are paying attention to this. This is an impactful um, fear that is, I sometimes think it's unlike anything that we've been through as humans, because we're talking about the entire planet, and we're talking about really the future of so much of life, of human life. And that's not to discount other major tragedies like wars and pandemics that have happened, but it's really just a lot to wrap your arms around. So anyway, we'll come back to that a bit. And thank you for the question. I think that this work is related to mental health for many of the people I work with too. Why we are driven to do this work for healthcare and in healthcare is, I think, for many people based on their own concern and mixed feelings about this, whether it's anger that we're in this situation, or fear about how are we going to get through it, or anxiety and sleeplessness and things that interfere with our daily life, because this can be overwhelming. There's no question about it. And the deeper you get into it, it has the potential to be even more overwhelming. I read somewhere that climate scientists are an at-risk group for mental health issues related to climate. And I would say climate activists, or people working deeply in the field like I am and the people I work with, might also be in that category. But I also think that in some ways, I quickly go to action. That's one of my coping mechanisms. And it is a joy to be able to work on this with other committed people in an organization with the kind of commitment that Tyler talked about. This is rooted in our core value of justice. It is something that the sisters have asked us to do as they handed off care to lay leaders, including, as Tyler said, following the signs of the time. It is something that is supported and encouraged by our Catholic social teachings. It's something that's required of us as healthcare providers, for us to do no harm and to take care of the messes that we're causing, which, healthcare is kind of polluting, I have to say. So all those things kind of come into it, I think, both to fuel the work and also to assuage the tough feelings. I was surprised during the earlier days of the pandemic, when we were really announcing our goal, that even though people were overwhelmed by the pandemic, they still wanted to talk about climate, and they were pleased that we were looking at it. We had our eyes open. We are not denying it. We're not poo-pooing it. We're not downplaying it. We're saying, no, this is a real problem. This is a serious problem, and we need to do our part. You've probably seen, because this series is called the We Act series, that We Act stands for waste, energy, water, agriculture, food, chemicals, and transportation. But really, it's the we and the act that are also so important here, because action, for me particularly, and many people, is a way for us to cope in a meaningful way that helps me feel better and also helps get the work done. That's a win-win. And that ever important I think it's really important for all of us, especially people who might feel isolated, that none of us are alone in this. We're in this together, and we'll only get through it together. And there are many, many people around the world who are really concerned and are working on it. And so I like to remind all of us in Providence and beyond that this is a we thing, in all counts. So I'll stop there. And Sydney, I'm going to turn it back to you. So especially reflecting on what you said a moment ago, what do you do to take care of yourself? How do you cope with these things? And what do you recommend to others who may be feeling overwhelmed, whether it's people your own age or people any age?
Yeah, I think the best place to start when trying to figure out how to take care of yourself and how to take action, how to have prolonged action, is figure out where are you getting your motivation from, and have to try to find a fuel besides all the stress and anxiety that we are feeling. And I think the best place to start is to try to build up your relationship with the environment and the relationship with nature, so that you can feel that love and compassion and respect, and have that be your fuel to take action, instead of just pure fear that will make you burn out and run out quickly. And I think, as Beth was touching on, we also need to recognize that all of us have our own little parts in this. None of us can change the world alone, to quote Hank Green. And we need to remember that in times like these, where each little action that we take builds up to a larger whole. And I don't think it's a selfish thing to try to step away and not to try to step away from all these bad things that we're hearing, and to try to take care of ourselves and take time for ourselves, and to try to take time to relieve that anxiety. And yeah, I think those are the three main things to remember. 1, you need to build up your relationship with nature and try to get a better fuel other than anxiety. 2, you need to take time for yourself. And 3, you need to remember that we are all a part of a bigger whole, and we are all capable of taking actions to help this crisis. And Tyler, I want to ask you, so I've been told a lot as a teen that it is my generation's job to solve this problem. I touched on this a bit earlier, but we are not the ones who caused this. We've only been here for so long.
Yeah.
And so it's just really, really frightening. And as someone who's more of a, parental generation, how do you feel about that? And how can your generation support best support the true climate action?
Oh, Sydney, I am so glad that you asked that question, and I'm so deeply challenged by it. And I'm really glad, I'll come right back to it, but I'm so glad that Beth paused a minute ago to lift up what you said earlier about that it's hard to think past 30, and that and the sort of deep way that you described the terror that you and your friends have around that. And as a parent, that's both so hard to hear because of what it means about our future, but also it is awakening to our complicity, not only in this sort of half-baked thing, oh, the young people are going to solve this, they're so bright, the future, which is really, I really hear that as kind of how poorly that lands, and also how sort of disrespecting it is for the responsibility that all of us have and can take right now. So I really want to mention that I really want to honor, frankly, the question and where it's coming from. So the place I kind of might begin is that, we've heard about mental health in the past. Oh, 1 in 5 Americans, 1 in 4 Americans. Heck, it's 1 in 1. All of us have been experiencing increased rates of anxiety and depression and falling back on our addictions in one way or another. Most of us are not doing better, frankly, from all of this. And so that shared experience of recognizing our shared suffering is, I think, kind of the font of us being able to take some very specific actions. And the first one I want to lift up is by turning to one another, just as in some ways we're doing here. And I hope that people do coming out of this conversation, to allow ourselves to honestly describe how we're feeling, what it means for us, how it impacts our life, and allow ourselves to be heard. And to return the favor, one of the greatest gifts we can be given. The late Archbishop Desmond Tutu said, the most important human need is to be heard. And we can do and be that for each other. So that's the first, create an opportunities to turn to one another. Secondly, think about where you can make it safe to talk about these issues at school, at work, in our community, in our faith settings, in our social settings, so that it is okay and we're not teased or bullied or diminished for actually being sensitive human beings who are feeling despair around some of these issues. Because that safety that allows us to come together and share is also the safety that is an environment for us taking action. I am deeply inspired to be part of Providence with the kind of commitment that Beth just described, to be net zero by 2030, the strongest commitment in the healthcare sector. At Wellbeing Trust, we have been investing in education and action, our partnership with Eco America, the work with Young Invincibles, our work with Hopeful Futures and Inseparable to make sure that there's mental health professionals accessible to every kid through their school. Those are all institutional commitments, and we can all make those. And straight from our Eco America report, it called out a series of steps. Make a climate commitment. You don't have to be a giant health system to make a commitment for your home, your school, your workplace, your social group, etc. Secondly, take stock and aim for quick successes. What can we do in our own lives, etc., that do this? These things give hope by making action. We don't need to be intoxicated that they're going to fix the issue. But if we're not in motion in this direction, no wonder we're going to feel deeper despair. Establish priorities and set plans. Engage and communicate with others. Do creative thinking and ideate about what actions might be. And to help encourage policy action. And by being a constituency for actions that matter. I think that maybe I'll kind of turn it back to you with this, Beth, that hope is not about the conditions around us. Hope from finding that place of our commonality and taking action in it. Beth, you reminded us of our Catholic social tradition that reminds us to love one another as ourselves, because we are one another. We are in deep relationship with every human being. And when we deny that or push that away, we actually do violence to each other. Sydney, you reminded us of the power in being in nature, because when we are in nature, we actually feel our conviviality and our mutuality with all of creation. In that place, we can find the beginnings of hope and to take action. And I know for me, the best way that I can face you, Sydney, and I want to look you squarely in the eyes as that parental generation, just alongside my own kids, and know that I am hearing you, respecting you. What you and your friends are feeling is the real deal. There's nothing the matter with you. In fact, what's going on is a sign of power. And I want to meet that by doing everything I can, and like Beth is doing, and all of Providence and so many of our colleagues, to help create a world that is worthy of you and your grandchildren, who, God willing, will come. Beth?
Thank you, Tyler. What a lovely way of acknowledging the truth of this situation, of actively listening and hearing, as you suggested, of reminding us that there are things that we can do, and to reflect on what Sydney said, to find something that is meaningful to you to do, because there's a whole range of opportunities. And I'm reminded a little bit, when you were speaking about hope, of Joanna Macy's work, if people haven't discovered that yet, about active hope. And to me, it is not waiting with, well, I hope that happens, but saying, I am hopeful to invest in the future with my action. So I was going to end with a little bit of a circularity, and we've heard a bit from Tyler about what just some of his final wrap-up comments, and I've just said a little bit. So Sydney, let me ask you, is there something you'd like to add or say right now?
I know, like, speaking of like hope, one of the things that I really try to like keep close to my heart is just that hopelessness never leads to action. We need to try to foster the hope that we have for the world, and also just try to trust one another and be kind to one another, and know that things will hopefully be okay eventually. They might seem awful right now, but we need to hold out that hope, because if we don't hold out that hope, nothing will get done. And I think there is inspiring people like these two adults right here that are showing us that things are getting done.
Terrific. Thank you. I know that we have a number of resources that I think have been going out and put in the chat, perhaps. And I would like to ask Tyler if he could just address, if anyone is feeling in acute distress, if there is something, Tyler, that you would recommend, just so that we address that a little bit.
Well, one is to remember that you can always reach out to Crisis Text Line or any one of those national lines. It's why it's so important to be supporting our 988 legislation too, but ask for help. One of the most important gifts you can give another person is the opportunity to show up for you. So if you're feeling it and you need some help, find someone. And if you don't have somebody handy, call one of the 800 numbers or crisis text line and reach out, because you deserve it. Your life matters. This planet matters, and we're all here for a reason. So let's bring that.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And you all, this was just so fun. I want to do this for another couple of hours, but I thank you both for your sincere contributions and your wonderful words. And I look forward to future conversations. And thank you all for joining us today. And I hope that this has been a helpful session. And I will just remind to moving back to sort of advertising mode, to learn more about what we're doing at Providence, for instance, for our initiatives, programs for environmental stewardship, or any of the services we offer, or our related to, like the Wellbeing Trust, please visit providence.org. Make sure to follow us on social media, and I believe all of the hashtags and whatnot are posted. So please check those out. Please share the word about this event and others, and we'll be back probably in about a month. So thank you again to Tyler and Sydney, and thank you all for joining today.